Jesus Christ, this one's gonna be a really hard one to talk about. See, this movie for about a year was extremely controversial for many reasons. Whether it was the boring and simultaneously cringe title, or something about the different animation, people were just crapping on this movie before release. However, the movie did the thing that all movies do, and it came out, and people liked it for the most part. How did I feel about it? Well, it was fun, but that's about it. So, Dragon Ball Super horrendous title is definitely a lot different from the other three movies. This movie, rather than focusing on side characters but only having them there for the sake of jokes or even pointless action scenes, actually puts them in the forefront this time. The characters in particular are Gohan and Piccolo. Two characters that peaked at some point in the series but then faded into the background as Goku and Vegeta obtained more power. And by the time Super hit, these guys were just in the very far background, since Goku and Vegeta were basically fighting gods now. While yes, Gohan and Piccolo did participate in the Tournament of Power arc, and actually a lot of the tournament arc, even in arcs where they had important moments or action or some sort of important dialogue, they were still just set dressing for the audience of side characters from Battle of Gods to the Tournament of Power. I think the best thing about making them the main characters is that it makes Dragon Ball not feel like it's just in the Goku and Vegeta toy box, with a few extras here and there. You know, it makes the Dragon Ball world, well, a world again. Instead of the fairly insular writing that just focused on Goku and Vegeta while sometimes making even Vegeta a sideshow, the movie focuses on Gohan and Piccolo. It doesn't give them stupid filler mini arcs either, it actually gives them main character roles in a somewhat big movie. Although I wouldn't exactly say it's as large scale as the other three movies, it still is the most they've been given since Z. I think the only issue with the side characters being the main focus for this one is that it really does make Goku and Vegeta's sparring scene kinda pointless. I know it comes back like after the credits, but at the same time, it's a post-credit scene, which is like barely part of the movie, because before the credits roll, that's when the most pivotal parts of the story happen. Besides, after the 100 minutes of this movie, you kinda just forget that this scene even happened. It also weirdly sets up a, love subplot with Beerus and Sheila, which makes no sense, but whatever. This movie also does something I've wanted for years from this series, which was to finally age up Goten and Trunks. I know it sounds nitpicky, but them still looking 8 when they were like 14 was always annoying because it just felt lazy. I know that the Saiyans age slowly or whatever, but it still feels lazy because it felt like they weren't willing to design anything new for them. Even though it could totally be as simple as just making them taller, but like, alright, I guess. Thank God they actually aged them up after looking like literal third graders for decades. Also, Pen is no longer a baby, and she's really wholesome and amazing and stuff. Gohan and Piccolo in this movie have an arc that's honestly just sort of a critique of Gohan at this point. Piccolo wants Gohan to train, but Gohan goes, "I want to focus on my studies instead of fighting because we've already saved the world." And Piccolo's like, "Yeah, if you don't get your tree branch looking ass out of here, I'm gonna punch the shit out of you." Basically in smart terms, Piccolo doesn't really want him to just slack off and become complacent. To me, this is somewhat similar to Resurrection F, with the main character being incredibly complacent and not pushing himself hard enough. The problem with Resurrection F was in its execution, making Goku an overconfident jackass, but the way it happens literally has to use inconsistency to tell its own story. In Superhero, Gohan being the main character for this message makes a lot more sense since he's considerably underpowered, at least compared to Goku and Vegeta. Gohan in the past decade at this point has been a pretty controversial character. Not just due to the fact that he was significantly nerfed, just in the fact that he's just done nothing. And he's pretty much just as useful now as the side characters that fade into the background over the course of the series. Except Yamcha, obviously. I like that Piccolo has his own imperfections too, and that he's too worried and it disconnects him from others. It's really nice to see the characters both have flaws, not as one note as Gohan needs to trade and Piccolo's in the right. I will say though that the other side characters like 18 and Goten and Trunks, even though I like that they aged them up, weren't exactly necessary to this plot, but at the very least they actually did something for more than 10 minutes. The villains are fine, I guess. Carmine is fairly secondary and has no personality, but he's well voice acted, and Hedo is barely an antagonist. Gamma 1 and 2 are my personal favorite of the villains, and I think their redemption arc is pretty cool, but they're not really anything more than just decent. I wouldn't exactly say I gel with their designs either, because they're fine, I guess. The real main villain, or at least the main antagonistic force in this movie, is of course, Cell Max, who is literally just the equivalent to a boring giant MCU villain. Unlike the actual Cell, he has no personality and is basically just there for fan service? I don't know what they were trying to do with it, but I mean, it was just kind of the catalyst for Gohan transformation, I guess. Now for the real reasons why people actually talked about this movie. The first one being the animation. Oh boy. This movie, unlike the other three, and unlike the entire Dragon Ball series as a whole, is rendered in 3D animation. Or more like 2.5D, remember Batman Ninja? Am I the only one who remembers that? Whatever. The thing about this is that when it was first shown in a trailer at San Diego Comic-Con 2021, people initially thought, yeah, this looks really bad. And when more trailers came out, it didn't really do them many favors because it seemed like Toei and the marketing team just sort of picked out the most awkward looking shots from the marketing. But the thing is though, like I said earlier, the movie did what all movies do and came out, and it actually looks really good. The thing about this animation is that there are some scenes that look off, which again, were mainly just seen in the trailers. And the ones that weren't in the marketing look great. I think my only real issue with the animation and the action scenes is they don't really take full advantage of the fact that it's 3D animation, but still are just as fun as the other movies. I would actually say that the fight scenes are pretty damn good in this movie, with great anticipation and follow-through like the others. It's really good, but I wouldn't exactly say it blew me away like Broly did. I feel like a Dragon Ball movie rendered in CG with cell shading was pretty much inevitable at this point, considering that they had been using 3D animation in moments from Battle of Gods to about Dragon Ball Super Broly, and even sparsely used it in the show. But I still feel as if it was a little bit too early to try to experiment with the style. I guess the animation would have been better if they just used the Shintani style again, but at the same time, it makes sense why they decided to animate it in CGI. See, the thing about 2D animation is that you have to draw every single frame. On average, how animation frame counts work is usually based on how many pictures are drawn, as far as I know. So, considering that a lot of animated movies in 2D are about 24 frames per second, sometimes having varied frames, that means usually they draw around 12 to 24 drawings to achieve 12 to 24 frames per second. This is literally 24 drawings for 1 second of animation. And so, of course, it would actually make sense for them to actually choose 3D. Because the thing about 3D is that you just model it and just, download the models as files. And the thing about said files is that files can be shared. And with a team of 3D animators, it actually makes the working process a lot more efficient. So, modeling the characters and saving them as files on a computer makes the working process a lot faster. I won't pretend as if every company should stop making 2D animated movies, or never try 3D at all, but at the same time it makes sense. At the end of the day, every company just wants to make money anyways, but they want to make it in as little time as possible, and without extra costs. In a sense, there was an idea to experiment, but also it was a way to reduce costs. Basically, the animation is really good, but it's really obvious that it was just kind of used to cut costs. The real thing I want to talk about are these damn super forms. Okay, so in the past 10 years more so, I feel like a lot of the transformations have either not made sense or have just been not earned at all. Especially recently in the manga. What the fuck did they do to Frieza? Oh my god. Jesus, everything as of recent has been pretty hilarious or just random. Or both. Piccolo's new form, I guess I can get behind, but honestly there are way too many transformations as the series is, it sucks. Beast Gohan is pretty much the same problem, different flavor. I guess it's kind of earned because he unlocks it through rage, but it already recreates a moment that's already been done before. The problem with these forms is that they just feel like they're there to fill up a crowded space. Their main purpose is just to sell a bunch of toys. With Gohan, it tries to replicate a moment that was done so much better in Z. And I love Z, but trying to repeat the same character arcs in a way that's a lot more flaccid just feels like regressing for the sake of fan service. At least there's a really cool fight at the end. So in the end, Dragon Ball Super Superhero is fine. I like that they didn't focus too much on Goku and Vegeta again, because even though they are mainstays, I don't think they really need to be the only characters with any sort of focus on them. Sometimes we just need to show off the side characters and what they can do. I like the animation at times, I thought the relationship between the main three characters was really wholesome, and the action was really great. I just feel like it just could have been so much better. I feel as if Broly set such a high bar that this one just couldn't top it at all. I guess it's fine to have a palate cleanser once in a while though, but honestly, this movie still kind of left a lot to be desired. It's definitely still a really fun and good movie, but Broly just was so much better than this movie ever could be. And it also had a better villain, so there's that. But yeah, Dragon Ball Super Superhero is pretty good, but it could have been so much better. But at the same time, it was a lot better than I expected. I think the real question is regarding these movies is, which is actually the best of this? I think if I ranked all 4 modern Dragon Ball movies from worst to best, it would be a fairly standard ranking and honestly kind of inoffensive towards the general public, at least I think. I would still say that Resurrection F is still the worst movie in this entire series for being the most boring. Like, seriously, nothing happens in the movie. In third place would definitely come Dragon Ball Super Superhero, because while it's not exactly as great as it could have been, it was also not as bad as it could have been either. The second best for me is definitely Battle of Gods. Battle of Gods was such a great revival for this series after being dormant for almost a decade. And while yes, it definitely has the most simple story of all these movies, it was still really fun and well told and really well paced, and had some genuinely good moments that remind us why we even like this franchise. And finally, of course, Broly is the best of the modern Dragon Ball movies, and in my opinion at least, the best Dragon Ball movie, period. It felt somewhat small scale, but it also felt large scale at the same time, especially with this great animation. And probably having the best villain of all of these movies and in the entire series. I guess that's it for these movies. There will probably be a movie afterwards, but as of right now, the new movies we have are not awful. At the very worst, they're just kind of alright. And at their very best, they're actually really good. I think that the newer Dragon Ball movies are definitely my favorite of the anime films. Because honestly, a lot of anime movies are just kind of inoffensive, have high production value, but that's only because they're sort of just forced to. And I like the animation in a lot of these movies, but I feel like there's not really much of a story that they actually want to tell. And every single time there is character development, they always just go back on it. I like the fact that the DBZ movies as of recent weren't really afraid to mess with the canon, as long as they made the right choices in which to change in the canon. Dragon Ball is a great franchise no matter what anyone tries saying on anime Twitter, you fucking goddamn weirdos. I think these movies, even at their worst, still reminded me why I even cared about the series to begin with, while adding things to lore, and if not for these movies, Dragon Ball wouldn't really fare as well in the last few years. It wouldn't really have its own popularity that it has now. I would definitely recommend these movies that I talked about in this series. I think that if you're a Dragon Ball fan, you'll definitely get a kick out of these. And yeah, you should definitely just watch the entirety of Z and Super to actually know what happens in any of these movies. But overall, they're pretty good.